All the stars have come in close just to see you, I suppose, and they're a-gleaming. You must be dreaming, and the sun has said goodbye with a twinkle in his eye. He's left the ocean with sweet emotion. We go dancing in the rain, riding on a midnight train, away so slowly, and the moon is looking down on the sleepy side of town.
Hello and welcome to episode 38 of Little Big Knits. My name is Selma and I am your host of this knitting podcast. I'm coming to you from here in Ottawa, Canada, where I live with my family and our cat Yoda. And as I said, this is a knitting podcast. I chime in about once a month or so to share what I have been working on. It's mostly knitting. Occasionally there's some other stuff. Today, it's all knitting. I do also share at the end of the podcast some sort of other non-related items and often books that I have been listening to. So welcome. If you are new to the podcast, thank you for joining me today. There have been quite a few new subscribers. We've actually reached 8,000. And so hello and welcome to the podcast. And to those of you who've been around for quite a while, thank you for joining me again. We've got a lovely community that we have primarily on Ravelry. We've got a group there called Little Big Knits. We've got a couple of knit-alongs going on right now and people are in there chatting. People also come into the welcome thread. It's called Hello and Who Are You? So you're welcome to join the group and say hello, join in the knit-alongs if you like. We've got 2 knit-alongs going on right now. We've got the Garment Galore Cal, hashtag Garment Galore Cal 2020. That is a cal about garments. And I say cal, but as always, I always include crochet as well. And so that's about knitting garments, whether it be sweaters, skirts, cardigans, vests, pants, jackets, anything that would be considered a garment, not an accessory. So shawls, mittens, hats are not accepted. We also have another knit-along called It's About Time. And It's About Time is a knit-along or a crochet-along where you are using something from your stash that has been in your stash for at least a year. So this could be yarn, but it could also be a pattern that you've had from a book or that you've bought online for over a year. And it's about time you're finally getting to it. It's been sitting there saying, what about me? And finally you're getting to it. So we've got 2 knit-alongs and you can come on over to the group if you want to join in either of those. You're most welcome and it's lovely to have people there. Lots of lovely conversation and chatting and encouragement. And I'm also Selma Knits on Ravelry as well as Instagram. I think that's it for the introductions. Is it? Yeah. And I must say that there is so much gorgeous stuff happening in the both knit-alongs. It's so much fun. I go in every day and I check. I have not been able to join in the conversation quite as much this last month. It seems to have been a busy month, but there's plenty of it going on, despite my not interacting. So that's great. So today we'll be talking about what I'm wearing, what I finished, what I'm working on. There will also be a giveaway after that. And then I will share some life stuff as well as the books that I've been reading and some thoughts on what has been going on in the world. Because I think there's a lot to say about what has been happening in the world these days. I hope that you have been doing well during this last month of the COVID life. We seem to have found a rhythm and it's going fairly well, but I think we're in this for the long haul for a little while anyway, and so hopefully we are all finding some sort of semblance of peace during this time, and maybe even some silver linings and a little bit of joy. So before we get into the knitting, I just want to let you know that I am drinking a cup of probably my most standard tea, which is an Ahmed tea. I think Ahmed's from Ahmed of London, and it's the cardamom black tea, and I'm drinking it out of this mug by Nicholas Moss. I always have to look underneath because I'm never quite sure if it's Nicholas Moss or Nicholas Moore, that my friend Kate brought me from Ireland the first time she visited, and it's just a great big mug to be drinking some morning black tea. So first we'll start with what I'm wearing. I'm wearing a sweater that's been around in my closet for a rather long time, in fact. This is the Stafford Tee by Amy Christoffers. I knit this in 2011, so it's been around for 9 years. I have to say it fell out of favor with me for a little while. I'm not exactly sure why, partly for the reasons that I'll tell you in a moment, but somehow this season I have rediscovered it and I've been really enjoying wearing it actually. This is made out of ELSBETH LAVOLD HEMPATHY, which is a hemp cotton blend of some sort. To be honest, I can't even remember exactly what it is. They actually have some at my local yarn store, Wabi Sabi, and I've been really eyeing it because it is a great yarn. This is 9 years old. Over the 9 years I have worn it quite a bit, and it's really kept really in great shape, so I really like it a lot. So I'll give you a little show. It is a top that was in an Interweave magazine, I think in 2010 or 2011. I knit it pretty much immediately when I saw it, and it's knit from the bottom up, and I didn't completely follow the techniques because I remember that the shaping from the bottom up, it's slightly A-line, was done by making by using different sized needles, and I didn't quite like that concept, so I think I just knit it straight up if I remember correctly. And then there's a whole bunch of Kitchener that has to happen all across this lace bit here and across this knitted bit here, and I remember that was the first time I did Kitchener stitch, and whoa, that took some mental energy, boy oh boy. But I got it done. Somebody I knew back then came over and showed me how to do it, and she sort of gave me the Kitchener meditation, and I just walked my way through doing this whole bit here. That was quite a bit of concentration required to do Kitchener for the first time and on lace. So anyway, I'll give you a look. It's got this lace at the top, and I think one of the reasons I haven't worn it a lot is, as you can see, it's transparent. So, you know, it kind of shows off that area. So I have to be in a certain kind of state of mind to be able to be okay with that. But I'll show the sweater to you in its entirety. It just has just a knitted end, so there's a slight roll here. And there it is, it's just got this very nice lace. One of the things that happened was when I started knitting the sweater, I realized that I didn't have enough of the yarn. And so I believe I went on Ravelry and looked and found somebody who was destashing some. I think that's how it went. This was 9 years ago. I don't remember that well. And so I got a couple of extra balls, and that was going to give me enough to finish the sweater. However, despite being the same colorway, the dye lot was not the same, and they were actually quite different. So I had a little bit of a dilemma, and so what I ended up doing was knitting, and I had just enough yarn for this sweater. Like, I don't think there was much left over at all. I ended up knitting with one colorway to here, and then I started the lace with the other colorway, and I was able to do the top portion with of both sides with the other two balls that I received. And then I remember that the I-cord here actually ended up being done with the same green here. And if you look close up, you may see that there is a slight difference between these two greens. I don't know if you can see it. And I think that that bothered me for a little while, and I didn't wear this sweater because of that. But honestly, it's barely noticeable unless I point it out to people. So somehow in 2020, this sweater has come back into favor for Selma, and I've been wearing it quite a bit. So there you go. That's what I'm wearing today. And what have I finished in this last month? Oh my goodness, Yoda, are you coming to say hello? Oh, I don't know if she'll make her presence known, but at least she's in the room. Do you want to say hi? Do you want to say, look, say hello? She's like, no, I don't want to be on TV. Anyway, on to finished objects. The first finished object that I have for you is the Rift Tee that I finished over this last month. I was knitting this the last time I spoke to you, and I was knitting it out of this, I've got a bit left over, this RETROSARIA POMAR MUNGO yarn, which is a recycled yarn of 50% wool, 50% cotton. I remember telling you last time that I found the texture kind of a little bit ropey. However, I must say that it creates a very nice fabric. This is quite a woolly yarn. I've worked with other cotton wool blends that I find to be kind of more cottony than woolly, and I would say that this one is more woolly. And the fabric that it creates is actually quite a woolly feeling top. So I must say that this does not feel very much like a summer top. I might wear this on a cooler summer day, but here in Ottawa we actually have a very humid climate. Humidity can be upwards of 80%. So when it's, you know, almost 30 degrees and 80% humidity, you do not want any wool. You want hemp and cotton essentially, and linen and fibers like that. So I'm not sure, and when I did make this, I made it thinking that it would be a summer piece but also a spring layering piece. So I've determined that this is definitely not going to be a summer sweater, but because of it's almost like a vest, and I really like that idea, and I set out to make it so that it would be one or both of those, it would serve both of those functions. And as I said, I think it's just a little bit too woolly for the really hot days. However, when we do have some cool days, it would probably be good for those as well. The fit is really nice. I absolutely love the fit of this sweater. This is the Rift Tee by CIESLAK, and I will be making it again. And so what I'm going to do here is just pause quickly and do a little wardrobe change so you can see what it looks like. And here we are. So here it is. I'm going to show it to you. And I can tell you that this will not be my last rift. It's just got a very nice detail here with these twisted rib. The rib was not a joy to make because it's twisted on both sides. And it carries it up the side. It's a very simple outcome. Not a very complicated pattern, but some really, really nice details to it. And as I said, it won't be my last. In fact, I'm hoping this summer to make a second one. Now, I am just not convinced that this is the color for me. I think it looks fine, but as I said, because this has got a rather woolly feeling, and I've got to admit it's a little bit scratchy, I think that I would like this particular version to be more of a vest. But when I tried it on with the blouses that I have, I realized this just does not look good with the colors that I have in my wardrobe. So I'm not sure I'm going to keep this. I'm not convinced. I do have a friend in mind who I think would actually really look good with it. I don't know if it's coming off on camera, but it's got quite an oatmeal-y look to it and a little bit of a yellowy look to the color, which was not what I thought when I bought the yarn. When I bought the yarn, it looked more like an écru white. And so when it ended up having a bit of a yellowy tinge to it, I thought, is this really the best color for me? And I'm not sure that it is. But mainly, I realized when I tried it on with the blouses in my closet, I'm like, this just does not really suit my wardrobe. So I do have somebody in mind. I am hoping that she's interested in having it. And I'm happy to give it to somebody who will actually wear it. We'll see what ends up happening. But look, I just really like the way it sits. It just sits very, very nicely. It's not a very big V, so you know, it's just got a very simple look to it, and I just really like it. So I made this sweater that I'm going to show you about 3 years ago. It's the Paloma by King Hargreaves, I believe, and I've never worn it. This is the second time I'd made the Paloma. My first version I wear, and I have worn a lot. And this one I didn't wear. I haven't worn it once. It's a beautiful, beautiful mercerized cotton. I don't quite remember exactly what cotton it was, but it's a sort of a mercerized DK cotton that I bought in the discount center at Wool Time, another local yarn shop. But somehow the neck ended up being too wide, and the sweater itself does not have the loose fit that it should. I've also put on a little bit of weight since then, so it's even got less of a loose fit. So I haven't worn this in the 3 years, and that to me is an indication that it turned into a bit of a dud for me. So I've decided that after I finish the 2 works in progress that I have on the needles right now, that I'm going to unravel this and knit this into a rift. It's going to be a rift, and I'll have a green rift for myself, which will be out of cotton and will definitely be a wonderful summer wear. So before I give this one away, I have to, you know, make sure that I've got the right measurements of how long I made the body, because I think I really quite like the length of the body. It's just a good length so that it serves the purpose of being a tee or a vest. So yeah, so I'm gonna unravel this, and I think I'm just gonna knit it right into the rift. And then whatever I have left over, I think I actually have an extra ball upstairs. I might turn it into, I don't know, something else, or I'll keep it for potential stripe in something, or I don't know, we'll see. But there will probably be some yarn left over because this has got sleeves and this one doesn't. This pattern calls for a sport weight yarn, but it is knit at a 16 stitch gauge, which is really almost a chunky type of gauge. But so I used a DK yarn, and I think with 4.5 millimeter needles, I achieved that gauge. I believe I did, or not quite, and so I went up a size in sweater. I don't actually quite remember right now. But, you know, if you do some of the sweater math, you can make it work with a variety of types of yarns. So I think that's another really neat advantage of this sweater. So I wanted to tell you last time about these needles, and then I completely forgot. So I made a note of it this time, and I almost completely forgot again, but then I looked down and I saw them and was reminded. So I bought these needles about 3-4 episodes ago. You may recall, these are the Prim ergonomic needles. They are, it was actually Arne and Carlos had been, I think it was Arne who was knitting something at the workshop that I took with them in, was it in December here in Ottawa? They were doing a grand tour of North America. And they were knitting out of these needles, which are a Prim needle that have this kind of drumstick. They remind me of drumming. I was the drummer in the band in grade 8, just so you know. I have some drumsticks somewhere in the house from that time. So these just remind me of drumsticks. But then they go from this round tip to a triangular kind of part of the needle here. These are 4.5 millimeter needles. I bought them off of Amazon, I believe. So if you want to try some, go ahead. They are plastic and they go into this metal cable, which is quite stiff. I have to say that the cable has kinked a little bit. And I actually knit this sweater with these needles, which was possibly not the best idea, but I didn't want to switch needles. Mostly because this yarn is a bit grippy and the needles are a bit grippy. So it was a bit of a grippy knitting experience, knitting this sweater with these needles, but it was not so terrible, and I knew that it wasn't going to last forever, but I didn't want to switch needles part way because I was a little concerned about what could end up happening to the gauge, and I didn't want that to happen. I have had that experience before where I've changed even different metal needles and I've ended up with a different gauge, so I didn't want to do that. So I finished the sweater with these needles, and I don't love them. As I said, they're grippy. That's not necessarily a bad thing if you are knitting with something very slippery like linen or tencel. This might actually be a nice needle to have. The join here between the cable and the needle is not very smooth. So and because they're grippy, it didn't slide along very well. I do like a fairly stiff cable. CHRISTOFFERS are my favorite needles and they have a stiff red cable. And the cable was fine. It got a little kinky, but that can happen with CHRISTOFFERS as well, I find. So I might try these again with something that is a bit more slippery. The experience is nice because I think that the way the tip is, it slips very nicely into the yarn. And so it was very smooth that way. I wouldn't say they're my favorites. They certainly don't beat my CHRISTOFFERS, which are definitely my favorites, or metal needles, which I just prefer over any other type of substance. So the next finished object that I have is the Knit and Slide by Stephen West, which I was working on the last time I podcasted. And here it is in its finished product. I made the small size because I really wanted more of an accent piece than something to, really keep me warm. And I think I have enough large shawls, but I loved the concept of this shawl, and I've seen some really beautiful versions on Ravelry. And so I decided to knit it. It took me a long time to come up with the colors and come up with what I wanted. What I wanted was a light version, but I could never seem to sort of, pull together the colors that I really wanted. And then one day I thought, oh, I've got some Wollmeise lace yarn and that eggplant by MALABRIGO, the sock yarn in eggplant. I think those two would work together. They ended up working well together. And then I thought, I've got some drops, silk mohair for this portion, and we're gonna do it. So I did, and it's worked out really well. I think it's just got some beautiful, beautiful details on here. Quite the concept to knit these dangly bits. But as you can see, they're almost like chandelier-like and just really beautiful. And I think it's going to do exactly what I want it to do. I posted some pictures on Instagram a couple of weeks ago, I think, and it's just going to end up being a lovely little lacy piece that will keep me warm if I needed to, but is also, more of an accent piece. Very feminine, lovely color. I wear a lot of purples and plums, as you've probably realized if you've been around for a while. Although I haven't knit with that much purple, but I do love purple. It's one of the colors, as well as gray. And I think, look, it even looks nice with the cream. I think this will end up looking nice with a lot of different things, because even though it's purpley, there's also kind of a bit of a grayness in the yarn. And there's a close-up of the drops Kid Silk. So I think this was a great stash buster, first of all, because it didn't take a huge amount of yarn. The eggplant which I also ended up using along the edge and finished in the lace yarn. The eggplant did not require the whole skein, but it probably was the most that I used in the yarns. I'm gonna say probably about 350 yards, maybe about the same or a little bit less of the wool mice lace yarn, and then maybe one ball of the mohair that I used in here. In the original, the mohair is actually used along the edging, not in the middle, but I wanted to put it in the middle. And as I said last time, with Stephen West's patterns, there's a lot of playfulness that you can make it playful, you can make it subtle. His shawls really lend themselves to just about anything. So not my first Stephen West, not my last Stephen West. I'll definitely be making more of his shawls. The next one that I really want to make is the Vertices Unite, but there's also the Lumpy Space, which is not the most attractive name, but it is, you know, his designs are very interesting. There's often a little detail that's just unusual and original. And so I really enjoy knitting his shawls. They're a lot of fun. There's always a new technique, and so that's great. I got a little bit of my cereal stuck in my throat somehow, and it gave me a big coughing fit, so excuse me if my voice is all funny. So those are my finished objects. I'm just going to change my sweater again because I'm feeling a little warm. Hello again, back in the green. So I can honestly say that Sweater Mojo is back. I'm really all about the sweaters again, and so I have 2 on my needles. The first one was inspired by Melissa of Espace Tricot, who I feel like she just inspires me and many all the time. She made a linen version of her Missoni Accomplished sweater. Her Missoni Accomplished sweater is a yoke sweater with a sort of a chevron color work that is striped along the sweater. She then made herself a non-color work version out of, I think, the Espace Tricot Petit Lin, their in-house linen, out of a very nice sort of mustardy brown color. And as soon as I saw that, I thought, that's what I can make with that hot pink linen that I bought in Uruguay last year. So I immediately, well, this one ended up in a ball, but I immediately caked up the yarn. This cake went all awry on me, so I ended up having to wind it, and swatched and cast on the sweater. So this is some unknown linen yarn that I bought in Uruguay when I was there last winter, so a year and a half ago. And I went into a store in the downtown part of Montevideo. I can't even remember the name of the street, but there's a shop there that sells abuelita yarns as well as some other yarns, and they had some linen, and I just immediately picked up this pink, not knowing at all what I would do with it. It was extremely reasonably priced. And I have started on the sweater. Now, you're going to notice that the sweater is not on needles because I am having a slight, or is it on needles? Oh, it is on needles, but it's kind of unraveled here and there. It's been a little bit in the naughty corner because I started knitting down the body. I separated for the sleeves already, and I went to try it on, and I realized that there were somehow too many stitches in the back. The back is really loose, whereas the front fits really nicely. So what I'm planning on doing is unraveling and redistributing the stitches slightly so that there are a few less stitches in the back and a few more stitches in the front. I figure that way it'll even out. There was a bunch of stitches cast on for underneath, but I don't think I want to change that because I think that the sleeve is nice. But I'm just going to redistribute the stitches a little bit, which is something that Ellie of Skeen Deer talked about on her podcast at one point, and I thought, well, that's an ingenious idea, especially if you are a bustier person. Often, you know, that's where you want more stitches and not necessarily in the back. So you can redistribute the stitches a little bit when you're doing a yoked sweater, and you know, it'll have less stitches in the back, especially if you're somebody with a narrow back. If the stitches are the same in the back and the front, and you've got a narrower back and a larger bust, for example, when it doesn't really make sense. So you can play around and redistribute the stitches, especially on something as simple as this sweater. So here we are so far. This is actually the back. I am going to have a bright pink linen sweater. And I am actually, now that I'm seeing it, it's got to come out of the naughty corner, and I've got to get working on it again because I'm just quite excited about this. I think it's coming up a little bit more bubblegummy on screen. There's a slight salmon feeling to it in real life, but I am very excited about this. So there it is so far. The thing about linen is that as you're knitting it, you kind of think, oh my gosh, this is very messy looking. But once you finish knitting with it and you wet it and block it or just lay it flat, I don't actually pin my sweaters in any way. I really just lay them flat. Unless if I were to make a sweater and realize that it was way too small, then I might pin it to try and stretch it a bit. But I generally just lay them on my drying rack, and that's it. So, but with linen, what I find is that when you're knitting with it, it looks kind of messy. As you can see, the stitches just seem to be going in all kinds of directions. It seems kind of unruly, but then when you wet it and you lay it flat, everything just kind of falls into place, and it's wonderful. So anyway, I think I'm going to be doing that perhaps this weekend. I'm going to rip this out, these 3 inches, and redistribute the stitches a little bit, and then continue knitting it. So that is one of the sweaters that I have on the needle, and it is being housed at the moment in this bag by Jenna Rose because it just happened to be around and I picked it up. I think I had the shawl in here last time. And the other one that I'm also working on is being knit out of some MALABRIGO sock yarn. There you go. There you get a sense of, this is, I believe, the ABRIL colorway, which means April, and it's this purple that has some blue and burgundy going through it. Now I have 3 balls of this, which I got from the the mill, the dyeing center in Montevideo in 2011. So this is also deep stash. And the 3 balls are quite different from one another. As you can see, this one's a bit more bluey and this one's a bit more wine colored. So I'm having to stripe them. And what am I making with this? I am making the BREEZEWAY by Laura AYLOR. And this is a pattern that somebody very kindly gifted to me, so thank you. And it had been in my wish list for a while because this is something I've been wanting to make for quite a while. It's just a very nice tee that is a yoke with a short row kind of, what do you call that, sort of hem where it ends up being a little longer in the back than in the front. And just some very nice little details. And I'm still on the yoke, but here is how it's ending up knitting up. That's the fabric. As you can see, it's being knit on 3.75 millimeter needles. I'm almost finished all the, well, I've finished the yoke, and there's some raglan shaping or raglan increases to bring you down to underneath the arm. So I think I just got 4 or 6 rows left of that. And then I'll be separating for the sleeves and going down the body. So really, really enjoying this. I started this when I determined that I wasn't quite sure how to fix what I didn't like about the MISSONI accomplished. So I started working on this in the meantime. And now that I've determined what I want to do with the other one, I think I'll pull it out and continue working on it. And we'll see which one ends up being finished first. The MISSONI Accomplished will probably have 3/4 length sleeves, and this one will probably have short sleeves. This is the MALABRIGO sock, which is a merino wool. So again, probably not a sweater that I would wear on a really hot, humid day here, but it is a very smooth, easy yarn. And I actually have another sweater that I don't wear at all that I made many moons ago, called the Turmeric by Vera Välimäki. That was made out of MALABRIGO, and at the time I did wear it. And I would say that this is, because it's a light merino, it's actually not so bad to wear, but I wouldn't want to wear it on a really hot day. So anyway, this is what I'm working on these days. And this one happens to, again, be in a bag that I just sort of grabbed because it hadn't been put away yet, but not a very summery bag. I feel like I should probably take out my summery bags. This is the bag, the Outlander inspired bag by Harrington Bags. And so that is it for the knitting content of the podcast. However, I said that I would be giving or announcing a giveaway today. So if you're interested in participating in the giveaway, you will need to comment here in YouTube, much like we did for the last giveaway. And like the last giveaway, I won't be responding just because I like to keep each comment as an entry. So please comment only once, and that comment will be an entry. And the prompt for this giveaway, should you want to enter, is to tell me something about where you live. I just think it's fascinating that people have come to watch the podcast from all over the world. My highest viewership does seem to be in the States, and I believe Canada, and then Germany, and then a whole bunch of other places. So hello. And I'm just really curious about where you come from. Sometimes people tell me that, they're writing me from Belgium, or they're writing to me from, Turkey, or from Philippines, or wherever. And I just think, wow, that's just so amazing. So I'd love to hear something about the place where you live, or where you're from. And if you don't want to share that, that's fine. You could tell me something about a place that you really would like to go to one day, and perhaps why. So that is the prompt. And what is the giveaway, you ask? The giveaway is this yarn, which you can't see, but I'm going to put a picture here on the screen so you can actually see this yarn in its glory, because this is yarn by Arctic Crafts, which is yarn dyed by BENTE. BENTE lives in Norway, and she has, I had won this yarn actually, and I wanted to share it with you. I have since bought more of it because I really want to knit with it, but I wanted to give this away, and I didn't want to open it because I thought, what a neat way to receive yarn. The last time I bought yarn from her, it came in this package, and it was so much fun to cut it open and see the yarn bloom. So I decided not to take it out of the package for the giveaway, and put a picture up on the screen so that I can send it to whoever wins, like this. This is a skein, and believe me, it is 400 and something yards, just like an ordinary regular skein of fingering weight yarn. This is in her rock garden colorway, so it's a gray colorway with bits of green and red, like a rock garden. Absolutely beautiful, and I've ordered myself a skein of the exact same colorway. And this is in her POLDALE base, which is a mix of Polworth and Corriedale, and it's a sock yarn. So I believe there's some nylon content in there as well. And as you know, if you've been around for a little bit, if I knit socks this year, I'm trying to knit out of fibers that I've never knit with. And so I'm really excited to make socks out of this POLDALE Corriedale mix. So yeah, so this is the prize for this giveaway. And if you're interested in receiving this and knitting a wonderful pair of socks, or a hat or whatever else you might want to make, please comment below, and your comment below will be an entry. And thank you to BENTE for this wonderful yarn. It's just great. She's got some really wonderful colorways in her shop, and she's giving us a 15% off code for the podcast. So if you're interested in going to check out BENTE's yarns and her fun colorways, please do. It's Arctic Crafts, and the code for 15% off of your order is LittleBig15. So I'll put that on the down bar here, LittleBig15. So thank you so much, BENTE, and yeah, go check her out if you're so inclined. All right, so that really sums it up. I'm looking at my notes down there for the knitting content of the podcast. So we are actually at the end of June. My birthday is June 28th, and I'm not quite sure when this podcast will air. It might end up airing on my birthday. So, but June came and went. The last time I podcasted was May 24th. And I always have this intention of podcasting more often, but life has just been really quite busy. I'm actually surprised by the fact that I feel like I haven't even knit as much as I normally would. For example, this week I didn't knit for a couple of days at all, which is pretty unusual for me, but there's just been a lot going on in the month of June. We've had my son's birthday and of course Father's Day, and the end of May is really the start of gardening season, so there's been a lot of gardening going on. Not so much at home. My backyard is not, really needs some attention, I have to say. It's not the most attractive. But I also have a vegetable garden, which is in an allotment, community garden type of place. And so I go there a couple of times a week, and there's a lot of weeding to do, and there's been planting to do, and organizing and watering. So that has taken up a lot of my time. In the month of June, we were also able to, I was also able to start visiting my mother, which was really, really nice. I think I might have mentioned this last podcast. And as the rules change kind of constantly, because we're moving from one phase to another in easing up on the COVID restrictions, I had to actually get tested for COVID, so I went and did that earlier this week in order to be able to continue to visiting my mom, and it was negative. So I was able to visit her this week, and so I've seen her. We've been doing a lot of walks, and we've got a badminton net set up in the backyard, so there's regular playing of happening of badminton, which has been really, really fun. And I think I told you last time that I was starting to run, and I was doing the NHS Couch to 5K, which is a podcast that you can listen to, and it takes you through interval training of walking and running to get you to 5K. And that was going really well until I got towards the end of the second week, and then my knees started to bother me a lot. So I had to put that on hold. And we'll see if I get to it. My knees are feeling better, but I'm a little bit nervous about getting back to it, so we'll see. So I've been doing a lot of walking, whether it's here in the city or we've gone on some great hikes in the Gatineaus and in other walking areas around Ottawa. So that's been really, really wonderful. And I have been listening to some books as well. Last time I podcasted, I was listening to My Brilliant Friend by ELENA Ferrante. This is a book that she's an Italian writer. It was written in Italian and translated into English. And I think I told you last time that I wasn't quite sure how I was going to enjoy it, because I wasn't quite sure I really liked the translation. And I have to say, I did not love that book. I know it has been hugely popular. It is the first of a series of books. I have been assured by reviews, as well as somebody else who said the books get better with time. I don't know, well, I shouldn't say I don't know. I didn't love this book. for a couple of reasons. First of all, I really don't think the translation was very good. I know that my cousin read read the whole series, some of the books in English and some of the books in Finnish, and said that the English translations were not as good as the Finnish translations. And that bothered me, because sometimes I just thought, geez, that just the way things were said just didn't feel rich. It felt like maybe I wrote it and I'm just not a great writer. So I really didn't like the translation. And while I think the story was interesting, and it was a slow description of life in Naples in the 50s, 60s, in Italy, and sort of the feeling of what it's like to be in Sicily at that time was interesting. I didn't love the characters. I didn't believe that their friendship was really, I just was like, what, these two women are best friends? They just don't seem like best friends. One seemed to be spending all her time comparing herself to the other, and the other one seemed to only approach the other one when she needed something. So I don't know, it was kind of, I just didn't really love it. Now, that being said, because people have said the series gets better, I thought I might try the second one at some point. So we'll see when I get back to that, because there is so much to read. So just as I was reading that book, I have to say that it was around that time that there was the killing of George Floyd in the States. And this erupted in a huge series of demonstrations around the world, of conversations, of discussion, of outrage, and hopefully, let's hope, action. That's the most important thing, to move towards removing systemic racism as much as possible. So I have to say that the next book that I'm almost finished listening to, I picked up because of the conversations, and it's called Between the World and Me by Ta-NEHISI Coates. And it is a book that is not very long. He wrote it as kind of a letter to his adolescent son. He's a Black American writer and is basically writing a book to his son about being a Black man in the United States. And I've been listening to that book as well as just really engaging in the news, in the conversations on Instagram, really trying to listen and learn and support as much as I can when I see something interesting, when I see something important, thought-provoking, and necessary to post. I post it on my stories, so if you happen to be interested, I've saved a highlight called BLM for Black Lives Matter, and there's all kinds of posts in there, books that I've read as well, and so this has been a time for really thinking about systemic racism within the Canadian borders as well as beyond, because although all of the big news items erupted in the United States and has caused, the whole world to react, which has really been incredible. It has really made, I think, our situation in Canada as well. It's really highlighted the situation in Canada because we have our own situation with Black Lives Matter, with Blacks as well as Indigenous peoples to reconcile and to fix. So, despite our being the polite Canadians, as people tend to call us and joke about, we have systemic racism here, and I think we've had enough of our own brutality towards Black people as well as Indigenous people and other races to really examine what we can do to move forward. It's important to think about things, to think about this, to sympathize, to empathize, but we also have to take some sort of action. And I think that everybody's grappling with this right now, and that is extremely positive. And I really, really hope that we can move towards something more humane, more real, and life-giving to everybody. So I'm almost finished Ta-NEHISI Coates' book, Between the World and Me. It's beautiful. It's vulnerable. It's anger-inducing. It's insightful. It's really, really well written. The language is stunning, especially I have to say after listening to My Brilliant Friend, which was not a very good translation. Listening to this rich language, just the language and the way he phrases things alone, it makes this such an incredible book to listen to. But I think it's also just a really important book to listen to. So if you are thinking about listening to books, this is not an anti-racism book per se. I think, you know, this is an important book that he needed to write for his own child. I think it's definitely awareness raising as well as just being truly beautiful. So I recommend it. And I have like a half an hour left to listen to. So today I'll be going out for a walk at some point and I'll be listening to the last half hour of this book. And then when I've read a good book, I need a couple of days to just process it and really think about it. So I'll probably be doing that with this book because I know that it's going to sit with me. But then I'm going to be joining a book club on Instagram that is being hosted by Shelby, and the book club is her name. And she has suggested a book called Deacon King Kong by James McBride, which just came out recently, I believe this spring. And she's suggested that as her next book club, and I thought I am totally up for it and ready to read this book by James McBride. I've never read anything by him before, and I'm looking forward to that. And I'll tell you all about that when I have read it. So I think that brings me just about to the end of the podcast. As I said, this is kind of a birthday time for me. We're moving into July. And in July, we've got a couple of fun things happening. We are going to be going camping at some point with some friends, and we are still teleworking. So being at home and teleworking when we're not on holidays, because we don't have that many holidays. But at the very end of July, we've decided to go ahead with our trip to British Columbia. They are moving into phase 3, opening up. They've had very low rates of COVID all along and have been very successful in keeping it under control in British Columbia. And they're now opening up and encouraging people to come from within Canada. We had planned this trip a long time ago, and we're really on the fence about whether we should go or not. Air Canada has given people until the end of June to cancel trips and receive like an open-ended exchange for another trip. But in the end, because they've sort of encouraged people to come, and we know that the activities that we want to do are open, we've decided to go. So at the end of July, we'll be going to British Columbia, unless we change our minds in the next couple of days. But as it stands right now, we are going there at the end of July. So the next podcast will probably be either just before I go or after we've come back. So you might not see me until August. So I think that brings me to the end of the podcast. And as usual, I always come to the end of the podcast and wonder, what have I forgotten to say? One thing I forgot to say was about the opening music, because I get a lot of questions. So I always put it down in the down bar at the beginning now. I also put it down in YouTube that the music is a song called I Love You Only, and it's by Barefoot McCoy. So I'll be leaving with you with that, with more scenes of things we've done. I haven't actually put the beginning and the end together yet. I do that afterwards, and I haven't actually planned it, but I know that it's going to be scenes from our walks and the nature around from this last month and some of the things that we've done. So enjoy it, and I hope you have a good month of July. I hope you're safe, I hope you're well, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.
All the stars have come in close just to see you, I suppose, and they're a-gleaming. You must be dreaming, and the sun has said goodbye with a twinkle in his eye. He's left the ocean with sweet emotion. We go dancing in the rain, riding on a midnight train, away so slowly. And the moon is looking down on the sleepy side of town, and he's so lonely. I love you only. I love you only. All the birds have taken flight. It's their favorite time of night, when they can hear you from somewhere near you. And the palm trees try to bend to be closer to their friends. They're made of magic. Reach out and grab it. We go dancing in the rain, riding on a midnight train, away so slowly. And the moon is looking down on the sleepy side of town,